Hey, everybody. Looks like we've got most of the peoples. We've got Kara, we've got Marie, Zoe, Kelsey, Sean. I feel like there was one other person. We'll let them in if they come knocking. So I'd like to introduce our very special guest for the semester. Well, I mean, for this week, we've had a couple of guests, just not guests as cool. So we've got Kris Williams here with us today, as I've talked to you guys a little bit about who Kris is, and very little bit about her experience. I will let her talk more about that. But let me just share my screen real quick, just to give you an idea of what I would like to kind of do. So Kris is going to tell us her story. That's kind of the biggest part of this, and really kind of define what her experience with narcissistic abuse is. And a lot of you probably haven't heard of it specifically, but you may have heard of it in that you recognize it happening to people, or that you've seen it in your own lives. So Kris is going to talk about her story. We're hoping to kind of give you some warning signs of what to look for, red flags that you could be in a toxic relationship like that, or if somebody else that you know is. How do you help somebody? How do you help yourself? And then as it relates to the class, we also want to talk about how it affects your both mental and physical health, because we know that the two are tied, and that's really kind of where this comes in. So those are the things that we will cover. I will stop showing my screen so we can actually see one another. And I think that is it introduction wise. So Kris, I will let you begin, and people jump in with questions. I've got questions as well, but let's try to make it as interactive as we can.
Good morning, first of all.
Yes, and we all have to say a big thank you, because it is like 6 a.m. where Kris is.
It's
And
okay. It's good. It's good. I've found narcissistic abuse to be a struggle, and that a lot of people don't understand what it is. Like, you'll hear the word narcissist and you're just like, it's that person that's on Instagram all the time posting pictures of themselves. But it's a little bit more than that. It's actually a really vicious and a very cruel and calculated cycle. These people in their public lives, if you had met my ex, you would like him. I can guarantee you would have liked him. His neighbors like him, his friends like him, his family likes him, his coworkers like him. He did very well at work. And there was just always, from the beginning, things, it's funny, the red flags you don't see in the beginning, but it's basically like, because it's not understood, I've had people say to me, well, you can't change a person. You can't get into a relationship trying to change a person. The thing with this type of relationship, though, is you're not trying to change a person. You're going into the relationship believing the person is a certain way, what they're presenting to you. And then you gradually find out that that person is not at all what they sold themselves. And if you get far enough in, I was 8 years in by the time the light bulb finally went off. I'm sorry, I lose track a little bit. That's part of it. The brain has a hard time focusing. I've actually been told I'm dealing with PTSD and a few other things after 8 years from this guy. But I think so. It's just this constant cycle of, they come in, they're the best person you've ever met in your life. They are your soulmate. That's how they come off. They're very good at mirroring you. So they'll hear and listen to your story. They'll listen to your needs and your wants. They'll make you think they're everything you ever wanted or needed. And then once you're hooked in, they will drop you on your head like you just did not expect it. So you're kind of left in this like confused state of like, I had this perfect person and I had this perfect relationship, and I have no idea what just happened. So now you instantly will think it's something I've done, I need to fix it. What have I done? How have I upset this person? And you'll go into this panic little scramble. And as soon as you, like, during that panic little scramble, they'll ignore you, they'll devalue you, you're nothing, you're replaceable. It's really, really wild. And I found as soon as I stepped back and I finally just was like, okay, it's done, we're done, then he would swoop back around because I've lost interest. And all of a sudden, he's everything I ever wanted again. So you're constantly going through this cycle of you're absolutely everything. You're on a pedestal. You're the best thing in this person's life. To you're nothing, you're replaceable. And then once you finally give into that and want to leave, you're everything again. And because you'll keep getting glimpses of what you fell for in the beginning, you'll start to kind of just stick around because you like live for those days, really. I think the hardest thing for me when I got out was finally realizing that the person I fell in love with was never real. They were never real. And they're just very good masters of their environment, unfortunately.
Kris, so it seems like this person obviously is not the kind of person that when you're hanging out, when you're talking, like when you first meet them, you would never have any idea of fast forward 8 years. Or
Well,
could you now, having been through it? Are there things that you would be able to see in another person and say, oh crap, that's just like John, whatever the name is?
in the beginning, it's funny, when I first met him, very first met him, I'm like, this guy's a little arrogant. He's a little arrogant. But then he could be very charming. And then he could come off as very shy. So like, I just took it as he was misunderstood, you know? And because of how well he treated me in the beginning, constantly talking marriage, constantly talking kids, very much pursuing, very aggressively pursuing. I mean, this person lived in Australia and I lived in the US. And he tried so hard. I'm like, God, a guy in the next town doesn't try this hard. So like, let's not, we'll see how this goes. But it's a game for them. It's a challenge for them. It's about having a supply from somebody, a validation at all times. And as soon as they get bored with you, and as soon as they get bored with your like emotional supply, emotional support, emotional attention, they find somebody else. And that's the thing, is they're also serial cheaters, and they're very, very good at it. With my ex, when I left, I found out there was at least 5 other girls, 3 of which he had full-on relationships with, to the point he was meeting parents. He worked with one girl. I'm friends with those girls now because we all took the same ride. We all fell on our heads. We were all very much manipulated by this man. And I know that when I first met him, I didn't know it at the time, but he was engaged with a son at home. And he didn't even tell me about his son for the first 2 weeks that we were talking. And then when he did tell me about his son, he said that him and his ex had newly separated. They were sharing the house until he got reposted because he was military. And I've had friends in the situation, so I was kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt. But he was very much still with her. He was still very much engaged. And she hated me through our entire relationship. Unfortunately, I don't think she realized that she was part of this demented cycle, and unfortunately, instead of taking it out on the person who deserved it, I got the brunt from her. No, I didn't blame her at all. She had a son with him. Like, I get it. I don't think she fully understood what he was at that point. And I think by the time I started meeting the other girls, I started understanding that it wasn't me. Like, this man was very good at what he was doing, and it was not their faults, because one of the girls was completely blindsided by it. Completely blindsided. She had no idea. And he stayed friends with her behind my back while we were married for 2 years. So that was kind of the thing that started unraveling the relationship the last year that I was there. It's a lot.
So something you said that I have heard from I told you one of my best friends has been through this, and one of those things that I have heard a lot was that must have been a huge moment when you realized it was not your fault, because the sense that I get from these people, these narcissistic abusers, is very much that you constantly question, you constantly feel like it's your fault, even though logically you know it's not. Friends probably tell you it's not you,
Yeah.
but in that back of your head you feel like even the things you're great at, maybe I kind of suck.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it is they call it gaslighting. So they constantly make you like question your own reality. You could know the truth. You could absolutely 100% know how something played out, but they will make you question yourself. They'll make you doubt yourself, and you'll start seeing the situation differently, even though you know that's not how, internally, you know that's not how it played out. Um, he would, God, I'm trying to think of an example. Like the first, so actually, so I had married him, and then a month and a half after we married, so we got married, and then I had to leave Australia because I was under a tourist visa. I had 2 more days to stay in the country before I had to leave, because you have 3 months. So I leave, I come home. It was like right before Christmas, and I decided I would go back out so I could spend Christmas with him and his son. So I come home for a little bit just so I can reset my visa, and I go back. And I get there, and he's just very cold. He's very detached. Like, he has absolutely zero interest in me whatsoever. And we went camping with his son, and he's paying attention to his son. It was like I could have just been dead. Like, there was no emotional attachment with me whatsoever, and I couldn't understand what was going on, because he was very lovey when I wasn't around. I like to say, when I wasn't in his circle of control, he was very attentive. When I was there in front of his face, he wanted nothing to do with me. He wouldn't check in on me. He knew I had nowhere to go. He knew he controlled all the finances. He was just very emotionally cold. So I go through this 2-week trip, or actually it was like a week trip leading to Christmas with his son camping. And it was like New Year's Eve, I think, or the day before, I get this long email from this girl, Lauren. And she's like, I hate to tell you this, but so-and-so and I have been seeing each other for the last 6 months. He told me that you two were separating. I work with him. So, and I'm like, they're both military. So she didn't need somebody around all the time. So he was able to get away with a lot. And I read the email, and he was getting things ready because we're supposed to leave for this other trip together, another camping trip. And I went out to the garage, and I was like, so who's Lauren Bishop? Oh, she's just this girl I work with. Didn't skip a beat. No uncomfortable emotion, nothing. It was like, had I not gotten the email, I wouldn't have known there was more. I probably would have just left it at that. So I was like, okay. I was like, well, that's funny because, that's not what I'm hearing. He's like, oh, well, I just went out for a couple drinks with her. I'm allowed to have friends. You have friends. I can't have friends. So it went from completely denying, cold-faced denying, to it's not me, it's you. You're allowed to have friends, and now you're putting this on me. And I remember standing there like, what the hell? And I was like, well, I heard it was a lot more than a couple of dates. You've been with her for 6 months. Then it was like all the blood drained from his face, because he would go into these frantic emotional breakdown panics when he lost control of the situation. And he started to recognize that I knew a lot more than he thought. So now he's like, well, you've gained weight. You've gained weight. And, it's hard. Basically, it was like hard for him to find me attractive these days. I'm too needy, and I'm not as independent as I was in the beginning, which is something he stripped me of. And he just completely put the whole thing back on me. At the time, I was so pissed at him, I threw the ring back in his face. And I was just mentally like done. I was just like done. But I wasn't fully done, because he still had his hooks in me. I just married him. We've been married for a month and a half. The idea of a divorce a month and a half in, like, I think it would embarrass anybody. So of course now I feel like I have to fix it, and I have to work on it. But at the same time, like, I was like, you know what, screw you. I'm not going on this camping trip. You and Jack can figure it out. And it was funny because he was very good about putting this perfect wall up for his son. And his son, I loved him to pieces. I remember him coming to me. He's like, are you going on the camping trip? I'm like, nobody. And he's like, why not? I'm like, because your daddy lied to me like he lied to your mom, and I don't like liars. I had it. And I said it to him very calmly, but he started panicking. He's like, oh, don't. I'm like, somebody's going to be honest in this goddamn house. And he just backed down. So now it was interesting because he went, I insisted he went camping. I wanted the house to myself for 10 days to try to figure out what the hell I was doing. And then the last half of it, I booked myself a hotel on the coast. Now, this is a thing for a man who had complete control of what I was doing. I now booked a hotel on the coast. He didn't know where it was. I booked myself a car because I didn't have one. So I had nowhere I could go when I was at his house. So now I could leave, and he didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. He couldn't track me like he had done in the past through his iPad. And he was unraveling. Like, that's the only way I can explain it. It's a complete and total frantic meltdown. The problem is if you aren't experienced with this type of person, you can misinterpret the meltdown. And that's what I'd done for years. I took it as, wow, he does really love me. Wow, he really is freaked out that I could leave. Like, he really does want to fix this, because he would be, I love you and you're amazing. And I want it to be like it was in the beginning, and you're my everything. And they will just contact. If you break contact, they'll go through your friends, like sending your friends long rambling, she's the best thing ever. So then your friends are like, well, this is what he's sending me. Like, how bad can it be? And you're on the other end, like ripping your hair out because nobody has seen through the wall. You do not see through that wall unless you're with them on a daily basis, and you're the brunt of all of their anger, annoyance, their everything. And everybody outside that wall will just see this perfect person, this perfect member of society, and they will think that you are insane. Luckily for me, towards the end, his mom started coming around. I had too much proof. I think, unfortunately for him, because so much of the relationship was from a distance, there was a lot in text, there was a lot in emails, there was a lot. And there was a lot of his friends that were helping me through the whole thing, thinking he just had cold feet. But the more details they got, they got a better view of what he was. But yeah, it's does your head in is an understatement.
And I'm guessing you probably spent a lot of time. He probably would pull out the vulnerability card at some point and
Oh yeah.
talk about bad things that have happened to him, and then you would feel bad for him.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I definitely see the pattern where they are very, very good at being able to draw people back and take the attention back on them. And next thing you know, you're feeling sorry for them when
Yeah.
they had just called you XYZ, not an hour ago.
Yeah, his big go-to was drinking. So he'd say that he had a drinking problem, but he didn't have a drinking problem. So when I found out about Lauren, when she emailed me, the first thing he said was, well, I was drunk. I was like, so you were drunk for 6 months straight. That's how this happened. Like, don't act as though you had no control over the situation and you were this harmless bystander. Like, clearly she had the same story. He relentlessly pursued her in the beginning when she had no interest, until she finally kind of caved in. And then she became hooked in too, until she found out that I was back in Australia. And it wasn't until then, when her and I were going back and forth, she realized that we had married on the previous trip. But he was also big on, like, he'd use therapy against all the women too. It was like, oh, it's not working. Let's go to therapy. Let's go to therapy. Look at me. I want to work on this relationship. You should want to work on this relationship. And now you're like, well, I guess he does want to work on the relationship, so we'll go to therapy. I'd never been to a counseling session in my life until this man. Not one. Not to say I probably didn't need it at some point or another, but like, it was just, I'd never considered going. I never had a reason, as far as I was aware of, to go. And then when we went separately, and this is crazy. So we went separately. We had our own counselors, but through the military, they only had the 2 people on staff. So his counselor said to me, she's like, listen, we don't usually do this, but I know you guys want to do group sessions as well. We are understaffed. Would you be okay if I also did your couples? She's like, normally we wouldn't do that. And I was like, okay. I'm like, yeah, no, that's fine, because I can't wrap my head around what the hell is going on right now with him. So at least maybe if you're doing one-on-ones with him and then you see him with me, maybe you'll have a better idea of what's going on. She's like, okay, great. So we do a few sessions, and the perfect military man would be sitting in front of her. And he would say, they will say things intentionally that will set you off. You will have a strong emotional reaction to whatever it is that comes out of their mouth, and they're doing it on purpose. They want you to look unstable in front of the counselor while they sit there and look like they've got their act together. So he said a few, what was that?
Because it kills your credibility.
Totally, right? So we do maybe 3 sessions. I found out I was always worse off at the end. The worst thing you can do personally is go to counseling with a narcissist, because if they play the game perfectly, it'll just leave you feeling that much more crazy in the end. I will say with this counselor though, and this is what I mean by he used it as a tool. He used it as a tool to keep you in the relationship, because he can say, look at me, I'm working on myself and you're not giving me a chance. But at the same time, like, they will go just as long as they have to go. Once they feel like you're locked back into that situation, they're done. They have no intention of staying. They have no intention of actually working on themselves. They have no intention of really turning things around. They're just trying to keep you locked in. So I couldn't keep going because I was coming back to the US. Again, I was still on my tourist visa. So I had to leave. And the counselor, who was his and our couples, she called me, but just me, while he was at work. And I should have taken it as a hint then, but I was so out of my mind at the time. She was like, listen, I really need you to understand whatever is going on is not you. This is not something you've done. This is not something you deserve. It does not make sense. She's like, we'll talk about his family. He kind of brushes it off as everything sunshine and rainbows. She brushes off work life, brushes off childhood. She's like, there's nothing there that he's telling me that is a problem that could be causing what's going on. She's like, but he's all of a sudden decided he's done, that he's fixed. And she's like, I think he'd benefit from continuing to go, but I can't make him go. And she just kept repeating, this is not you. Like, you need to understand this is not you. I was like, looking back now, I'm like, was she trying to warn me to get the hell out? I think in her own way, she probably was, because it was just, the whole thing was so crazy. It's crazy. And you could think that you'd never fall for it, but they are masters at what they do. Masters of manipulation, masters at sympathy. They'll get you to feel bad for them and want to help them, and then they'll make you feel like nothing within seconds. It's wild.
And so, not knowing you at all prior to this, I am going to guess that you are also a big time giver, somebody who is very supportive.
Yeah.
It seems like that's the person who they tend to go for.
Yeah. I tend to do stuff for other people before I do things for myself. And they very much take advantage of that. If you are somebody who forgives easily, you will fall for this very quick. They test boundaries all the time. There is no boundaries with a narcissist. They'll just keep pushing. And every time that you let them get away with it or you forgive them, they're not taking it as, oh, she forgave me, I'm really going to try hard this time. It's like, oh, I get free range. Like, she let me get away with this, that, and the other thing. I can just keep doing whatever the heck I want. They do not operate like a normal human being. And like I said, if any of you met him tomorrow, I'm willing to bet some of the girls would fall for him. He's not the best looking man on the planet, but he wasn't bad looking. He was super charming, super funny, and he could totally play the Romeo. But as soon as you're locked in, and for me, locked in was, I became financially locked into the situation. And then once that happened, like the floodgates opened. Like they gradually just got worse and worse and worse. And one of the things they'll say too is that, you know, each roller coaster, each up and down will start getting closer and closer. Like sometimes these little episodes, they kind of give you a look into what they are in the beginning, will be spaced out. So you can just write it off as they had a bad day. But once you get to the end, it's just a constant hellish up and down ride. It is the word. When I was 18, I dealt with a man who was physically violent with me. I will tell you right now, I would have preferred him to this man. When you are trained from a young age to recognize physical abuse and sexual abuse, this is something that's pounded into our heads from the time we're kids. If anybody lays their hands on you, it's not okay. If anybody touches you inappropriately, it's not okay. But we are not trained to see emotional abuse, mental abuse, and financial abuse. And they're very good at all of it. Very good at all of it. So it's yeah, I mean, I don't know.
So, and so two things. One, I want to tell the students something real quick about narcissistic personality disorder in general. When if you take an abnormal psych class, you'll see that there are different sort of categories of disorders, and what used to be, they changed it around a little bit. What used to be called Axis 1 were things like depression, anxiety, PTSD, obsessive compulsive disorder, things that generally people know something's wrong, they seek help for it, it affects their life. With personality disorders, of which narcissistic comes in, it is part of who you are. It is ingrained in your self. So they generally don't see anything wrong. They don't get treatment. There's not a whole lot you can do. So when you look at things, people that have borderline personality, histrionic personality, narcissistic, it is very, very difficult to make a change. So when you see something like this, even though this person acts like they want to, it is all part of this innate drive that they have. And it's probably not going to get a whole lot better for them. The second thing, and kind of take us down a little bit of a different road here, Kris, at the time. So when you had met him, you were doing pretty well career-wise.
Yep.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, you're on TV, you're recognized. How did that all change? It seemed like that somebody like that shouldn't have had the opportunity to gain control, but yet it happened. So
one real quick thing I will say, because you were talking about how it's more of like ingrained in them. I have a hard time because there are some people that will kind of have pity on the narcissist. They're like, oh, they don't know any better. That's just how they are. However, they do know right from wrong, because they can turn it on and off. Like if they're in the outside public world, they very much do the right thing by everybody. They follow the letter to the law to like the nth degree. Mm-hmm. But when they are home, that mask comes off, and everything and anything is fair game.
Yeah.
So it's a hard one to wrap your head around, because it's like, I remember explaining things to him, like decent, like just human decency. Like, you shouldn't be treating me like this because X, Y, and Z. And I felt like I was talking to a small child, but like, he's in the military. He's well educated. I'm like, he knows this. He knows this. And he used to play like word games with me all the time. One of which I started catching on to some of them, and I turned one of them around on him. So I would have some reason to want to talk to him. And it would be nothing crazy, and I wouldn't be coming at him in an aggressive way. I'd just be like, hey, like when you did this the other day, it kind of made me feel X, Y, and Z, right? And he would instantly go from 0 to 60. Like, I get it. I get it. I'm an asshole. I get it. I'm like, no, you're not, I'm not saying that. I know I'm an asshole. I'm an asshole. I'm like, I didn't say that. So now I'm scrambling, trying to get it back down to 0 and scrambling to try to convince him that he's not an asshole. And by the time this little conversation is done, he's off and he's fine. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, nothing was talked about. And he got me defending him to himself. What the heck just happened? So, but when it finally dawned on me, the next time he did it, I was like, I'm going to play this game a little differently and see how it goes. So another thing happens down the track, and he's like, I know, I'm the asshole. I'm like, yeah, you are. And I said it very calmly. He's like, what? He's like, you're calling me an asshole? I'm like, no, you called yourself an asshole, and I'm going to agree with you from now on when the shoe fits. And he was just completely, like, he just like, what the hell happened? That didn't work. So he'd try something else the next time. It was always a new game, and I would fall for it until I realized a game was being played. As far as, when I met him, traveling the world, I think my last year we did 22 countries in a year and a half. I was not a millionaire by any standard, but I was doing pretty well. And that was the thing when we first started seeing each other, everything was 50-50. Paid everything 50-50. And it was just, I wanted kids and I wanted a family. I had just turned 30. He was telling me everything I wanted to hear. I thought he was it. And I just fell for a hook, line, and sinker. And by the time that I was done, because I technically left and I had to leave without telling him and go no contact. God, it's been like a year and a half now. I honestly wanted to die. I felt like I had already died. I remember saying to my friend, like, I'm dead. My body hasn't figured it out yet. And I was annoyed that my body hadn't figured it out. I just wanted it to stop. I would go to bed at night wishing I wouldn't wake up in the morning. And the only thing I'd feel the next morning is annoyance that I woke up. I had no friends out. Well, I had a good neighbor who was a friend. Beyond that, like, there was nothing for me to do. There was nowhere for me to go. I had, at that point, been out of work, like regular solid work, from 2013. And by the time I left, this was 2019. He constantly had me in this pattern of, well, I couldn't work in Australia until I had an actual visa there. Beyond a tourist visa, I needed one that allowed me to work. When I came home from the US, I wasn't here long enough to actually find solid employment. So it was one of those deals where I would be here for a month to maybe 4 months max. I go out there for 3, I come back for a month, 3 months, go back out. So I wasn't here long enough to get anything going. I was there for long stretches, but again, it still wasn't long enough, and I couldn't legally work there. I was somebody who always had 1 to 4 jobs at any given time in my life. So to go from that to having nothing, and then when I would try to get things going, he would kind of belittle it. From the abuse from him, I put on 70 pounds. I would eat things that he didn't agree with, and he'd call them fat cakes. I'd eat something, and let's say I went to Weight Watchers or something, and I was trying to get back on track. He'd question every single thing that I put into my face. I remember cooking dinner one night, and he came over and he took the knife out of my hands to show me how to cut vegetables properly. It was just a constant, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're replaceable. And it was just a constant beat down. I felt like an empty shell. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. It was just a constant numbness. And then on top of it, with the weight, I didn't recognize myself anymore. I was just so done. I was just so done. Yeah, it was crazy. And I had this, I would have which I found out later was PTSD, a like constant fear of the next thing happening. It's like, okay, he's in a good mood now. Okay, things are really good. But I didn't realize those really good days, usually somebody else was in the house or around to witness it. So I would live off those days. I'd live off those highs, waiting. You're like a drug addict for attention, basically, or a drug addict for just the good days, because the good days would be really good. They'd be really good. not normal good. So it's the craziest thing I've ever dealt with. Like I said, I would have rather somebody who hit me, because when that happened, it lasted 4 months. This mind game, this back and forth and up and down, and everybody who's been through this and been through it long enough will tell you they felt like they were dead. They were an empty shell. They had no self-worth, no self-confidence, nothing. They were just zombies going through their days. It's like the worst thing because it's so hard to recognize. And even if you do recognize it, all the people around that person will lift them up like they're some kind of a hero because they have no idea what's going on. They can't comprehend it. They can't. And in the beginning stages, if somebody told me he was like that, I never would have believed it. I never would have believed it. He was the perfect guy.
Wow. Wow. So fast forward to, how did you realize that it was time for a change, and how the hell did you do it?
All right. So January 2019, I found out about a girl he cheated on me with in 2014. And all that year he was dangling marriage. He was always dangling marriage. We'll get married when, we'll get married when, we'll get married when, we'll get married this year, we'll get married next year, we'll get married, whatever. He always had an excuse to slide out of things. And narcissists are really good about moving goalposts. They'll set up a fake future and they'll constantly move the goalpost on you. There's always a reason why it can't happen now. But they'll just give you enough that you hang in there. So 2019, I find out that he was with another girl for 6 months. Met her parents, the whole lot. They're staying in each other's houses. They lived within walking distance from each other. That whole year, we were planning on getting married. And I remember him on video chat laughing in my face because I was so nervous to talk about it at that point because I was so used to the plans being pushed off or dropped off or whatever. He was like mocking me, laughing at me that I was nervous to talk to him about planning it. But at the same time, he just dumped this girl because he knew I was coming back to Australia. So anyways, I find out about her in 2019. I had just gotten over the girl that I found out he cheated on me with when I married him. I just gotten over it. It took 2 years for me to get over that. And I remember I had helped him move down to Sydney. We're up in Brisbane. So I don't know, that would be like living in Massachusetts and moving somebody down to like DC. So it's far enough. And he's having to live on base and I'm having to live back at the house for an extended amount of time. So anyways, I find out about this girl. He lies about it. He turns around on me. It's my fault. I wasn't giving him enough attention. I was giving him too much attention. I gained too much weight. I look whatever. So I unraveled again, completely melted down. He goes into a tailspin because now he knows I want to leave, but he's stuck in Sydney. So I had, without him knowing, I went to the bank. I withdrew $1,000 from his account, which I never did. I always asked for permission to take money out of the accounts. And I flew down to Canberra to stay with my friend, and I didn't tell him where I was going. So this is the thing that kind of started it off. So he didn't know where I was. He didn't know where I was going because I intentionally took the cash out to put in my account to pay for flights. So he couldn't see any of that information. I was with her for about a week, had my phone turned off the whole time. He sent me this big rambling letter admitting to all the cheating, like trying to get me to come back and all this stuff. So then after a week, it's like, well, I have to go back and face the music at some point. So I'll just go. I get there and he looks completely unhinged and unstable. And like I said, that weird emotional unraveling that will trick you into thinking that they actually care about you, but they don't. You're a thing. You're a thing to them. That's all you are. So he was worried about losing his thing that was giving him attention. And I, again, kind of fell for it. Long story short, we went down to visit his parents and stay with them over Easter. Then he would do grand gifts too, like over the top gifts to try to keep me in check. So this time around, his thing was, what did he do? He's like, oh, I realize that being stuck at the house and having no control over things, and you always have to ask for money, that must be really embarrassing for you. So what's your account number and I'll put some money in. I'm like, okay. So I'm thinking like 500,000 max. I look at my account, he put in 10 grand. 10 grand, because he would do this type of, that was extreme. But usually what would happen after these stunts is, like, a normal birthday, I get a massage, right? He gave me a gift certificate for a massage. When something like this happened, it was an expensive camera lens, or it was a trip to somewhere. It was all about distracting. And the thing is like, once the distraction was gone, because during the whole time you're being distracted, you internally are like, something's still not right. Like, everything's so perfect right now. He's being so nice to me, but like internally you're just like, you have that little danger alarm going off. As soon as he felt that I was back in my place, he'd go back to being what he is. And I'm just like, nothing was discussed. I had a bunch of shit thrown at me, but nothing was discussed. And then I go to talk to him about it, and it was instantly like, you just can't let things go. You really have a problem with being stubborn and like not letting things go. And I'm like, nothing was resolved. Nothing was resolved. So anyways, this time around, his distraction was the money. And his distraction was, I'm going to send you home to America. You've been here for a full year and you missed your family, and your niece is turning 1 and christening and all this stuff. You're going to go home. Not only are you going to go home, I'm going to go home with you for 5 days. For 5 days, he's going to fly out to the States and then come back. So that was his grand display of giving a crap about my family, which he normally didn't. That was his grand display to look at me and how wonderful I am trying to make things work. When we're down with this family, it was perfect. It was everything that I wanted. Him and his son, his parents, I love to pieces and still do, but I had to cut contact with them as well. And it was just a really good week. So again, I got hooked back in. So I go home. He comes with me. He's like the perfect guy in front of my parents and my grandparents and my sister, everybody. Everybody loved him. They were getting to really know him on this trip. And he leaves, and I'm staying because he was in training for another job and he'd be away for like 2 months. So we both felt it was better I was home with family than there by myself. And every day he's texting nonstop. Again, outside of his circle of control. Text, sending me pictures of flowers as if he's giving me flowers, super flirty and like calling all the time. I felt like I couldn't get anything done because my phone was always ringing or buzzing or something. So now my dad, who felt like he got to know him better this trip, got mad at me or annoyed with me when I flipped out at one of the times he called. I'm like, why won't you just leave me alone? Like, I can't get anything done. I don't understand this. Like, because he wouldn't bother me with me when I was in Australia. He wouldn't care. So my dad looked at me like, wow, you're being kind of harsh on him. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, Dad, you have no idea. If I told you everything I've been through, you'd want to murder him. Like, he would want to murder him. So anyways, I'm there for two months. I have to come back to Australia. And I saw him for, I think it was 2 days before he had to leave for another 2-week work trip. So he was good, but he was also distracted getting ready for the trip. And right before he left, I just strangely noticed him walking down the hallway with the iPad in his hand, and he was kind of awkward about it. And I was like, I remember taking a mental note, like, that was kind of weird. So he leaves to work, and I'm just in this mood of, oh, you know what? I'm really going to try. Maybe this is me too, because, you know, I've been upset about not being with my family. I'm in another country. Like, I need to make this place home, and I need to actually start trying. This is my fault. Again, this is my fault. So I kind of start settling in and doing projects around the house. And I was putting something away in his nightstand, and I saw the iPad. I'm like, he never puts this away. Like, it's usually out on the counter or it's around the house because everybody uses it. So I was like, okay, that struck me as odd. So I start going through, and I find this text to this girl, lots of videos, lots of pictures, lots of doing things, him responding to what she was sending. It was a lot. It was quite an eyeful. I lost it. That week, I didn't leave the house for a week, like did not step 1 foot outside. Didn't open any of the curtains in the house. I stayed in bed for 95% of it. I didn't eat for 3 days. I didn't drink for about the same. I wanted to die. I was done. I was mentally checked out. I had my neighbor sending her daughter over to check on me during the day, and she would come over and check on me here and there at night. Didn't shower. I was not good. I had people calling and checking in on me because they knew what was going on. I had them trying to convince me to leave without him knowing. I was still somehow convinced that I deserved this somehow and that it was my fault. And if I could just fix myself, or I could just understand myself better in our dynamic, then maybe things would get better. So I started going through the internet and finding books or whatever. And then when I finally started leaving the house, I went to the bookshop to grab, I forget what I was even there to grab, which one, but right next to it was this crazy book with this like hypnotic cover that said gaslighting. And I was like, what the hell is that? So I pick it up and I start thumbing through it, and I started reading some of the blurbs, and I was like, Jesus Christ, like this woman, I feel like she stalked us, like, or I could have written this myself. Like, this is an actual thing. So that's when the light bulb went off in my head, and everything in that book said, they will not change. You need to leave. You need to leave. It's only going to get worse. There is no fixing it. There is no getting better. The only solution is leaving. And once I read that book and I realized that, yeah, everybody's got their issues, but not to this degree, like this was not me. Then I reached out to my parents. My dad was like, get home. Everybody else is telling me, don't tell him you're leaving, because he's going to do the whole frantic breakdown mental thing. And I'm going to probably get stuck there for another 6 months. So he was coming home for 2 days. I talked to my parents on a Friday morning. I talked to a lawyer that afternoon. He came home Saturday. I'm not a good liar. I'm not. So when he came home, I looked visibly ill. He came home Saturday night. Saturday morning, I booked my ticket home for September 11th. So Saturday and Sunday, I had to pretend as though nothing was wrong. Monday, I dropped him off at the airport. Tuesday, I spent packing, which the neighbors helped me do. And Wednesday, September 11th, my ass is on a plane. And I remember sitting on that plane being like, is this the right thing? Maybe I should stay. Maybe I should work on it. Maybe, what am I doing? I was starting to get into a panic. Like, again, it was me. It wasn't until I got off the plane here in Arizona, I was with my family. Like, I was just like, I was a mess, but it was like, I never have to deal with that again. I never have to deal with him again. I never have to hear his voice again. I don't have to deal with any of this shit anymore. And everybody's aware of it now. Like, I knew once I told my dad, that was it. Like, there was no going back. But it took a lot for me to get there, a lot. And then to remain no contact, I talked to him through text. It was kind of funny. When I came home, I knew he was on his first flight with an airline, and he was flying to London with a plane full of people. And he'd have to fly home with a plane full of people. And all I could think about was these emotional breakdowns that he had. And I didn't want that person in the pilot seat. So when I left, I would respond to his text until I knew he was home. I knew once he got home, he had 17 days off. And I knew in those 17 days off, there was no chance he could hurt anybody. So as soon as I knew he was home, I blocked him from my phone. I blocked him from all my social media. And then he was trying to plan flights out. I saw that pop up on my calendar because they used to be shared. So I was in a panic. He was sending books to me that were like 8 ways to commit or how to commit. Those would randomly show up at my house. I had a lot of login attempts on all my accounts and they were all coming from Australia. So I can only assume that was him. I can't prove it exactly, but it just common sense. He did quite a few things to try to get through. And I finally had my lawyer ask him to go no contact. And I had not seen him until mediation in December, and I wasn't supposed to have any contact with him. I literally saw him for 2 seconds. 2 seconds. My screen wasn't on, my sound wasn't on, but his was. My whole body, I was like shaking. I was visibly
That was
shaking.
this past December?
Yeah, just seeing
I
from
had
Kris.
no idea it was this new.
Yeah,
Oh my
it is
gosh.
just new.
Wow.
So it was just a visible like, and at that point I hadn't talked to him for, just over a year.
Mm.
But yeah, it's a lot.
Kris, congratulations for being on this
Thank
side
you.
of things. I mean, that is a long time
Yeah.
and a lot of crap. And I, for one, I mean, for what it's worth, I'm a complete stranger, but I am so proud that you did what you
Thank
did.
you.
And God, it is so hard. Um, if Kris today could go back to Kris, like if you were friends with Kris from 8 years ago, is there anything you could have said?
Oh my God, avoid him like the plague. I mean, it's weird though too, because after having dealt with him, I look back at some of my past relationships and there has been a pattern of dating people like this. And I didn't realize it. Obviously not every guy that I dated was like this. Some people are just jerks. There's a very big difference between jerk and this type of person. But I did see a bit of a pattern. And now it's funny because as soon as someone starts talking to me in my head, I'm like, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. It's kind of giving me a little bit of radar with it, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. And if you don't know what you're dealing with and you don't know what it is, you can get stuck in that loop for a long, long time and be left with nothing in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I try to think about, what do you say to somebody that you're close with and you can sort of start to see it and you know that they can't. And that's a hard thing. Is there anything? I'm guessing it's almost like an addiction. Like until you
It
were
is.
ready, you wouldn't have heard what anybody would have had to say. You had to get there on your own.
Well, I'm a very big why person. If I don't understand the why, I get stuck.
Hmm.
I've always been like this. And I'll keep going in that pattern until I understand the why. With him, I didn't understand the why. Nobody understood the why.
Sure.
I talked to his friends and they'd be like, I can't believe he's acting like this. It doesn't make any sense. Maybe he's got cool feet. Like, there was no why for anybody. Nobody knew what was going on.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I had that book that it was just like, I had tons of people telling me to leave up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just like, oh no, marriage is hard. That's the other thing too, is like, we're always told marriage is hard. How hard is it supposed to be?
Right.
And you'll talk to other people and you'll hear the dramas they're having within their relationships. And you're like, excuse my language, but I'm like, it seems like everybody's dealing with their bag of shit. Maybe this is just mine. Like maybe this is normal.
Yeah.
So I kind of had a hard time gauging what was normal and what was not. And at that point, I was already used to the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So it unfortunately became normal for me.
Sure. Well, I think one of the other things that I see sometimes too is people then beating themselves up for the amount of time that it took. I don't know if you've ever, if you're experiencing any of that guilt now, kind of like, wow, these were 8 big years.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what you're struggling with.
I just turned 40 last month. And
happy birthday.
Thank you. I wanted kids since I was 30. And I mean, obviously I see some ladies in here and I wasted the decade to have kids. Wasted it with the wrong person. The person who used kids dangling the idea in front of me to keep me locked into the situation. It was one of many games played. So it's like, I can't get that time back. And now I'm having to, and that was one of the things I had to come to terms with myself to leave, was that like, there's a good chance I might not have kids at this point. Very good chance of it. And it's like, I have to be okay with that leaving. I could stay and have them, but like, why would I want kids with somebody like that? And on top of it, I knew that if I had kids with him, I would never be able to leave Australia ever. And I would be stuck as a single mom in another country with no help.
Yeah.
So it was just, yeah.
Yeah. There's bad choices and worse choices, it seems like.
Yes. Yeah. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. not that type of person.
Yeah.
They're great friends. They'll do anything for you, but you don't want to date them. You do not want to date them.
So
Yeah.
what's next for you now that you've kind of got a new start?
God, I've been still struggling with the weight loss. I've been talking to producers, but obviously the confidence is not there yet. So I've been struggling with that. The weight doesn't help. Having been out of the game for so long, that's been a little bit of a struggle trying to decide what's next, because I had nothing in the bank. I had nothing by the time I left. I had been out of work forever. So it's honestly just a complete and total reboot of everything. And I think the last year has just been trying to settle in to some degree. Like when I'm trying to think how to explain it. Just to not constantly be on edge and not ready for a panic attack out of nowhere. I know, like, one of the struggles I've had, especially with my new boyfriend, when we had one of our first real discussions, he said, well, do you want to have kids someday? Don't you want to have kids? And as soon as it came out of his mouth, I went into a complete and total mental breakdown. I was crying and hyperventilating and freaking out. And he's just like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm sorry. But every time I talk to my ex about this, that's the first thing he'd go to get me to come back around. So I think it's just trying to detach from all of that and just try to function normally.
Sure.
And just try to build myself back up again. Cause you lose everything.
Yeah.
You completely lose all sense of self.
Well, and I would imagine with the sort of emotional PTSD, that the idea of relationships in the future is kind of scary as hell too.
It's funny, like when I came home, I was just kind of like, I've let him ruin enough years.
Mm-hmm.
And I went onto dating apps and I was just kind of like, I hated dating in my 20s. I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
Hated it. So I dreaded dating in my late 30s, and I was trying to figure out, like, where is everybody at? Do people even want kids at my age? Like,
Yeah.
what can I accomplish at this point on a relationship end, not just like my own personal. But funny enough, I don't know, like with the guy that I'm with now, and I met him not too long after, and I've been with him just over a year.
Mm-hmm.
He is the exact opposite.
That's
Like
awesome.
the exact opposite. I've never thought to pick up his phone, not once. I've never questioned friends that he has that are women. Like, I don't know how I went from such a horrible situation to being that okay with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make sense. But I have had radar with his friends, which has bummed him out. I'm like, watch out for that one. He's just like, what? But yeah, it's a mess. To put it like simply, I guess.
So everybody else who's on and been listening to Kris share her story, which thank you so much for being so honest and open. It's wonderful, and I'm really glad that people are talking about it. Do you guys have any questions for her? I need to perpetually have a cricket sound effect device that I can play.
Oh God.
Okay. Nothing? Anybody? Bueller?
I have a question.
Okay.
So you said like that now you like are like friends with some of the women that he was like with or saw with him, you were with him. Did you like see like similarities between all of you, or were you all like pretty different at different points in your life?
I saw some similarities. One of the similarity is, all right, so narcissists don't go for what they see as weak people. Narcissists go for people who seem very independent and seem to have their acts together. Because the thing is they don't want to date somebody who is considered stupid or, you know, maybe not attractive or whatever they think in their heads, because whatever other people might think of that person will reflect on them. So they're going to pick people that they think are smart. They're going to think strong, like everything else. But once they've got you, they don't want you outshining them. So then they start breaking you down. And I definitely did see some similarities with the other girls. One of his the coworker that he dated, she very strong girl, very sharp. Same thing. She said he relentlessly pursued me. Like he played the same game. Anytime that we wanted something or needed something, he would use his son to put on like guilt or sympathy or whatever. So I was like, oh, my poor son, this, and I need more time with him. So like, I can't commit just yet. But then as soon as you're like, okay, and you back down, he'd be like, I really want you to get to know my son better. So he'd use his son to kind of reel you back in. So I think all the women were at a stage where they wanted a family and they want to settle down and they wanted a normal life. All of them were very much independent. They all had their own careers. They all supported themselves. The mother of his child, he was with her for 8 years, same length of time as me. And I am friends with her sister. She's still weird with me. She's still hell-bent on me being the problem. Her sister's very aware of the fact that I'm not the problem. The guy was the problem because she dated somebody like that herself. But her sister, from what she said, he left her in the same state, and she was very much own business, own everything. So it's definitely not a matter of targeting weak people. It's targeting strong people and using their insecurities. They work to get to know your insecurities, and they work to use those to break you down to the point where you're useless without them. Like it's when you're explaining to somebody who hasn't been through it, it seems crazy and it seems like you'd see through it, but these people are very, very convincing. They're very good at playing the victim. They're very good at blaming exes and making exes look like the crazy one, but it's just all a very elaborate game, unfortunately. But yeah, we all did have some similarities for sure.
Good question, Carol. Anybody else? Zoe, Kelsey, Sean, even Steve, you can ask questions as well. Steve is not officially part of the class, but I know he has followed your career some. So
I don't bite, I swear.
I don't have a question. I just have a statement. I just want to say thank you for sharing, because I feel like this is such a, I don't want to say common thing, but we hear about it all the time. And no one really knows. Like, I didn't really know what it was until you explained your side of the story. And I just feel like it's not taught, or you're not taught to look out for the signs of being in a relationship like this. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're definitely not taught, which I think is the problem. And unfortunately, I think it happens more than we think. And I think a lot of people don't speak out because you just feel like an idiot in the end. I really debated whether or not I wanted to start talking about it on social, because I was like, I'm taking the real risk of looking like a complete and total fool. I gave up a really comfortable life and I was having a lot of fun and I had my stuff together, and now I'm what? Like, I just felt like a ball of flesh when I came home. It was so weird. But yeah, it's actually a lot more common than we think. And it's funny too, because even now thinking back, I had this one friend, well, I had these two friends. I became friends with the guy first. His name was Brian, and he started dating this girl, Michelle. And originally Brian had a crush on me, but we were just friends. And he was pulling some games, but I didn't really think anything of it. And then I got to be really good friends with his girlfriend, Michelle. And I noticed that she was constantly apologizing, constantly over everything, over nothing, over things she didn't even do. And I remember like teasing her about it. I'm like, I'm going to start counting every time you say I'm sorry. Like, you didn't do anything. Like, stop it, you know? But then I realized when I first came home, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Somebody bumped me. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry. And a family friend was like, what the hell are you apologizing for? And it was just, you get used to everything being your fault. So now I kind of look back at her and I kind of worry for her. I haven't talked to her in a long time. I'm almost wondering if she was kind of in a similar situation, because I actually could see that out of that person looking back. But yeah, I mean,
have you ever seen it the other way around with a female narcissistic abuser and a male? I don't think haven't really heard many stories like that, but I'm sure it exists.
I've heard quite a few when I started posting things on Facebook. There was a lot of guys coming forward and talking about it. And then this is the sad part. So he starts telling his story, and I could very much relate to it, even though the genders were reversed. You know, it was the same game. It was just a girl.
Yeah.
And this guy jumps in and he's just like, we're not talking about you. And, you know, girls don't do this. It's just guys. And I stepped in. I'm like, actually, this is something that both men and women do to other people. This isn't the type of abuse that relies on strength, physical strength. It's not about that. It's all mental. It's all emotional. And both genders are able to do that equally. So I kind of chimed in and was just like, hey, and the guy backed off and he kind of apologized to him. But I think the other thing is even like as a female, it's embarrassing to be like, hey, you know, I just got taken for a ride. But I think it's even more embarrassing for a guy to admit that he'd been taken for a ride by a female, because people automatically see females as the victim. They don't associate the male as much as a victim. And I think they're probably more likely to be passed over or looked over by other people, unfortunately, when they do try to speak out.
So we are coming to the end. I know we've got like 3 official minutes left, and Kris, I know you have to get to work. So thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story, for being so open. I think it is amazing that you are out there talking about it, because like Kelsey said, people, you know, they don't talk about this kind of thing. They talk about the stuff that, you know, is obvious and is black and white. And the more we talk about this kind of thing, the more somebody else might be able to say, you know, I think that may be me too. So guaranteed, just by being out there on social media, just by name recognition, you probably are like saving people. So I really,
there's gonna be at least one good thing that came out of it.
yeah, but you know, you need to be good too. It's not just about them, but still.
No, I know, but I just, to have that many years wasted, there has to be something that comes out of it. And if it can be as simple as letting somebody else know that they're not crazy, or maybe turning them on to the same book that I found just by accident. Mm-hmm. I could not say enough about that book. I don't know. It's too easy to get stuck in it, and it's too easy to be destroyed by it. And if you don't know what you're dealing with, it can be pretty damaging.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
No.
Well, again, I just want to say thank you, and thank you to students for coming on late. I know that you had to kind of change your thing, although they're probably like, hey, we get to sleep an extra hour. So no, just a big thank you fest for everybody. Really appreciate it. And hopefully this was helpful for everybody. And don't worry, I will share with the other students and no one else. So you're good.
I was telling Jeff that I'm still going through divorce stuff on my side. So I'm just terrified of I didn't know if it's going to end up somewhere online with everything out, but
no.
It'll be nice when everything's done.
Amen. I want to hear how it all comes out.
Yeah, we'll do.
Very good.
Fun, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and all the rest of you. I will see you on Monday of next week, and great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.